The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for December 5th through the 9th of 2022. Alright, we'll start off with the Audnzd pair.
Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview of the current setup I was looking at. So the last weekly long trade, that form was right here back in February. And the last weekly short trade, that form was right here about 2 months ago. And by measuring the future strength of this long trade against the future short strength of this short trade, this long trade seemed to be stronger than this short trade. So this weekly bias seemed to be long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Now that said, the lower time frame confirmations always have the ultimate say in terms of these higher time frame biases. And so right after this weekly short trade formed, right in this area right here, there was lower time frame confirmation of strong short strength. And so at this point, this weekly bias was confirmed to be short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And just this week, that weekly bias's main target right here was hit. Okay, so at this point, the Audnzd's weekly bias is reset. And so I'll be waiting for another weekly long trade and a short trade to form, so I could again measure the strength differential between the two to come up with a new weekly or daily bias. Okay, but let's go ahead and review what happened on this setup, because it's very important to understand the different types of setups that form using this method of trading. So the next time a similar setup forms, you'll know what to expect. Okay, so let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, that weekly bias risk parameters that I just showed you was between this pivot high and at the weekly long trades pivot low that I just showed you. And that's roughly around here. So, okay, so initially we got lower time frame confirmation of strong short strength. And that's from this trend line, from this pivot to this pivot right here. Right at this point, we got a breakout, an immediate break back in, making normal long strength. However, price came right back down to that pivot low to create strong short strength. And so at the moment when price reached this price level right here, that weekly bias was confirmed to be short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this price level right here before reaching this pivot high right here. Okay, so if you recall, I was waiting for a pullback at least to about 1.1389, roughly around here, this price level, for a 100 pip stop loss for this short trade. Because the stop loss for this short trade will be at this pivot high right here. Okay, and then over the weeks, price just continued down toward its main target until price reached this price level right here, where there was actually a breakout and immediate break back in of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, which confirmed normal short strength. And so if you recall, I was mentioning if price can reach this pivot high right here, that will confirm strong long strength, which will now reverse that weekly bias into long. And so I was mentioning if that does happen and price does reach this pivot high, I'll be willing to take a long entry with a stop loss at this pivot low right here. However, as you can see, price never reached that pivot high and continued down all the way to its main target, right at this price level right here. Okay, so let me just zoom in right here because I know my face is blocking the price action. Okay, so again, right at this point right here, we had confirmation of normal short strength. And if price reached this pivot high, that would have confirmed strong long strength for a long entry. However, we did not get that move up to this level, and price continued down, right back down to its main target right at these levels right here this week. Okay, but one thing I do want to mention is that right at these price levels right here, I was already pretty sure that price will not reach this price level right here to make this strong long strength. So let me show you how I knew that. Let me just zoom in. Okay, so again, right at this point right here, there was confirmation of normal short strength, and thus I was waiting for price to come right up to this price level right here to create strong long strength for that long entry. However, this price action right here gave me a hint that price is likely to not reach this pivot high right here. Now that's because of all these rejection candles right here. Okay, you can see how every time price tried to go up to this pivot high, it was rejected down multiple times. And that's what's producing these long high wicks. Okay, so as price was getting rejected, as price was trying to go up to this pivot high, roughly in these areas right here, I pretty much knew that price will not be making that strong long strength by going up to this pivot high right here. Okay, so in terms of price action trading, it's really important to be able to read what's happening with current price just by the way candles form on an hour-to-hour basis. Okay? All right, so when a new weekly or daily bias forms on this pair, I'll keep you guys updated. Let's go on to the Euro-Yen pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please watch my forecast manual, which is an instruction book which allows you to better understand these forecasts. So if there's a term or concept you don't understand, you could look it up in the manual. Okay, and the link for that manual is in the details section of this video. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the current setup I'm looking at. So the last weekly long trade, that form was right here, again in February of this year. And the last short trade, that form was right here. Now going strictly from the strength of this long trade against this short trade, there seems to be more long strength than short strength. So this weekly bias seems to be long, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. However, again, the lower time frame confirmations always have the ultimate say in terms of these biases. And just this week, right at this point right here, there was confirmation of strong short strength, and thus confirming this weekly bias to be short. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Okay, so let me show you how that lower confirmation formed. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so we got a breakout and immediate break back in right at this level. Now let me go ahead and zoom in. Okay, so that breakout and immediate break back in formed right here. Okay, and that confirmed normal long strength. However, price came right back down just about 12 hours later to that pivot low where that normal long strength was created, and thus creating strong short strength and confirming that weekly bias to be short at this point. Okay, so all things remaining equal, if price could pull back right up to these 147.40 levels, roughly around here, I'll be willing to take a short entry with a stop loss at this pivot high right here for a 100 pip stop loss for this short entry. Okay, and you want to recall the reason why I'm taking a 100 pip stop loss for this short entry is because a short trade on this pair is actually going against the overarching trend. And so if you recall my earlier forecast, I was always mentioning that there's overarching strong long strength on the euro yen to begin with. And so since I'm trading against the overarching trend, I'm only willing to take a short entry if I can minimize my risk to a 100 pip stop loss. Okay, so let me just sum up this setup for you on the weekly chart. Okay, so back on this weekly chart, this weekly bias seems to be short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so if I could get a pullback right up to the 147.40 levels, I'll be willing to take a short entry with the stop loss at this pivot high and its main target right here. However, like I mentioned earlier, there's overarching strong long strength on this pair for the last year or so. So I'll be constantly watching for any strong long strength on the lower time frames to kick back in to confirm this weekly bias to be long, so I could take a long entry. Alright, so again, I much prefer to take a long entry on this pair. But as long as price does not confirm strong long strength and price gives me a nice pullback, I will be willing to take a short entry. Okay, so we'll just see what happens with this one, and I'll keep you guys updated.
Okay, so just a heads up. It's very important to always review your setups after they reach their targets. Now I know it sounds boring to have to review a setup after it's already been closed, but reviewing setups is really the only way to prepare yourself for that next setup months down the line. Now this is because the market, although not identically, tends to repeat itself. So having an abundant stock of possible scenarios in your head allows you the time to expect and, more importantly, prepare for that next setup in the future. And this small effort really goes a long way in terms of understanding how the markets function within your strategy, which is a knowledge that can only be gained if you take the time to review your trades. Okay, so that's it for this weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, guys. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.